Welcome to this recording of the Having Wellbeing Conversations workshop facilitated by the Employee Health and Wellbeing Service, which is a part of Cardiff and Vale University Health Board. Within this session, we'll be looking at how to have wellbeing conversations and also where to signpost people to for further support. You can watch this recording as part of a team meeting, or you can watch it for yourself as an individual, and there'll be moments where you can pause and do exercises throughout the session. Within Cardiff and Vale, the organisation has signed the Time to Change Wales pledge to join the movement of employers throughout Wales who are working to end stigma and discrimination of mental health in the workplace. Therefore, having wellbeing conversations is an important part of this movement. Statistics show that 1 in 4 of us will be affected at some point in our lives with our mental health, so being able to talk about it is important for everyone. Furthermore, 4 in 10 of us are afraid to disclose mental health difficulties to their employer. So it's really important for us to be able to have these wellbeing conversations and even just be able to reach out to people with a few small words, because that can make a really big difference. And ultimately, we want to send the message, don't be afraid to talk about mental health, and it's okay not to be okay. In order to have wellbeing conversations, it's important for us to be able to notice when somebody is struggling with their wellbeing and also to be aware of the various influences that can affect somebody's wellbeing. When thinking about how somebody may be affected in terms of their ability to cope, it can be helpful to look at this within the context of balancing their demands against their capabilities. And this is because a person may notice a drop in their well-being when they perceive that the demands of their work or personal life are greater than their capabilities. The key word within that sentence is around perceived, because we will all have different perceptions of our abilities to cope, and we may react differently to our colleagues, our friends, our family members, because we all have our own different perceptions of the world, which then influence how we feel and how we respond to our environmental factors. And what we want is for there to be a balance between these two things. So on the left, you've got the personal or job requirements, and that's made up of the various demands and pressures, whether that's workload or pressures at home to do things around the house, various things like that. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the capabilities, and this is the person's own individual ability to cope with things in terms of their skills, their knowledge, their resources. And when there isn't a balance between these things, we can see the impact on someone's ability to cope. However, it's also important to bear in mind that a drop in well-being can also result from having too few demands, as people can become bored, feel undervalued, and lack recognition. As mentioned on the previous slide, somebody's perceptions to how they could cope with the demands and pressures of their work or personal life is affected by their perceptions of their ability to cope based upon their own capabilities, skills, and knowledge. As part of this, it's important to bear in mind the individual factors that can influence someone's well-being. Take a moment to pause this video to think about the influences that can affect someone's well-being, both in their personal and their work life. If you're watching this as a group, take some time to reflect on this in your groups, discussing some of the ways that the factors can influence on someone's well-being, either from your own experiences or from the experiences of those you work with or support as a manager. If you're watching this as an individual, take some time to reflect upon this yourself, and then when you're ready, press play to resume the video. Now you've reflected upon some of the factors that can influence someone's well-being, we want you to take some time to discuss in groups or to reflect upon as an individual what you think the signs are that someone may be struggling with their well-being. When reflecting on this, try to take into account things such as someone's emotional state, their behaviours, and the impact on things like their cognition. When you're ready, press play to resume the video to see the ideas that we have around some of the signs that someone may be struggling with their well-being. Hopefully that gave you an opportunity to think about some of the signs that an individual may be struggling with their well-being. Here are some of the ideas that we have around some things to look out for. We've broken this down into the emotional, the cognitive, and the behavioural. Now, you may have already mentioned some of these during your discussions, but if you didn't, it might be helpful for you to bear these in mind. With regards to the emotional, we may start to notice that somebody has a negative or depressive feeling. We may also start to see them with recurring disappointment in oneself. If somebody is experiencing more negative or depressive feelings, we may be more likely to see increased emotional reactions, such as the person may be being more tearful or sensitive, or if somebody is experiencing more frustration, we may see them have increased emotional reactions of aggression. We may also notice changes in their behavior in social situations. For example, they may be more withdrawn or they may appear more lonely. We can also see how this could affect upon somebody's motivation, commitment, and confidence. And as mentioned earlier, those increased emotional reactions can affect somebody's emotions, which we may see in terms of more mood swings. When thinking of the cognitive signs someone is struggling with their well-being, we may notice them have increased confusion, struggling to make decisions. We might find that they are unable to concentrate, and this could be possibly related to poor memory or fatigue. And then finally, when thinking about the behavioural signs someone may be struggling, we may notice changes in their eating habits. They may be eating more, they may be eating less, and this can be observed in changes in somebody's energy levels and their physical appearance. We may also notice somebody with increased smoking or drinking more or taking more over-the-counter medications or substances to cope with some of their emotional experiences. Subsequently, increased mood swings and emotional reactions could affect someone's behaviour. We may see them being more argumentative, and this can have knock-on effects on relationships within teams. We might also see that someone is experiencing changes in their sleep patterns, so we might notice them maybe arriving later in work or noticing changes in their physical appearance, such as bags under their eyes. If somebody is maybe feeling more anxious, we might start to see them with more twitchy or nervous behaviours. And lastly, if somebody is affected by their well-being, this might be having a knock-on effect on their performance at work, so we could potentially see changes in their attendance. They may arrive later or stay on later to catch up with their tasks. Though we've thought about how an individual may be affected by a decline in their well-being, it's also important to consider how a group may be affected and how to look out for some of the signs that a group may be struggling. Here are some of the ideas that we have that you can look out for. If a group is being affected by a decline in their well-being, we may see increased disputes and disaffection within the group. We may also see an increase in staff turnover. We could also see increase in complaints and grievances, as well as increased sickness absences and reports of stress. This could also result in difficulty in attracting new staff and may also affect people's performance in their teams, which could lead to customer or patient dissatisfaction or complaints. Now we've spent some time thinking about how we can notice changes in someone's well-being or in the well-being of a team. We'll now look at how to have a well-being conversation. This video from NHS England and NHS Improvement talks through what is a well-being conversation and how to have one. Unfortunately, we're unable to record the video being played within this PowerPoint, so there is a link in the description on how you can watch this separately on YouTube. So take some time to go and watch this video and then return back to this video and press play once you're finished. If you were looking for a more formal guide that is specific for supportive conversations with NHS and social care staff, there is also the Wellbeing Conversation Guide, which is in development at the moment. It can be used as a starting point to have conversations around wellbeing and give some tips on topics that you can discuss. Ideally, the use of this guide will lead to further planned conversations, agreed actions, and even signposting between yourself and the individual with whom you are speaking. To access this on ESR, you can either scan the QR code and then follow the simple steps on the PowerPoint, or you can type in the title as it is displayed there at the top of the slide. Once you've typed this in into the learning pages on ESR, you should be able to select to enroll and apply, and then press the play button to begin looking at the guide. The Wellbeing Conversation Guide is broken down into 6 factors and 3 stages. Stage 1 talks you through how to prepare for a wellbeing conversation, taking into account things like giving notice to the staff member, giving them the opportunity to look at the guide beforehand, giving some tips on how to be curious and reassuring the staff member to see it as a way that's going to be supportive for them. Also gives some tips on how to make sure that you have privacy for the conversation and getting you to think about a way to record the discussion. The next stage then is around having the conversation itself, and it gives you some tips to look at the 6 factors that are a part of this conversation guide. At the end of the guide, it talks you through ending the conversation, thinking about things like action points, and then you have an opportunity to give feedback on the guide itself. As mentioned, this is something which is in development, so your feedback is welcomed in helping them to improve the guide and make it more user-friendly. The Wellbeing Conversation Guide looks at 6 factors that can impact upon someone's well-being. The first is purpose, so the person feeling like their job makes a difference. The second is control and influence, so feeling like they have influence over their job, feeling like they have some element of control and that their opinion is important. The third point is demands, so this is the person practically feeling like they have the resources to manage the demands of their role. As mentioned earlier, this can involve things like someone's skills and knowledge, and when somebody doesn't feel like they have the resources to meet the demands and pressures of their role, this is where we can see that loss of balance and somebody possibly struggling to cope. The fourth factor is belonging, and this is the feeling that the team cares about me and I have a sense of belonging within my team. The fifth is value, and this is around feeling valued and appreciated at work, and this can also be affected by things such as control and influence, and also feeling like they belong within the team. And the final point there is around fairness, and this is about feeling like you are treated fairly in your workplace. And this can also then be impacted by things such as feeling valued and also feeling like you belong and maybe feeling like you have the demands to manage your role. Though the Wellbeing Conversation Guide takes you through some factors and some tips on how to discuss them, we also have some recommendations that may be helpful to bear in mind if you want to have a wellbeing conversation with someone. First, find a quiet place with an informal atmosphere. It can sometimes be helpful to find a place where you can chat over a coffee or a tea or an uncaffeinated beverage, or even just having an opportunity to go for a walk where you can speak with the person in an informal atmosphere. When you are having the conversation with the person, it's important to actively listen to what they're saying. And some ways that you can do this are by using positive body language, such as nodding your head and using small verbal encouragers like, I see, or what happened next. And this will show that you're listening and encourage the person to continue. When the person is telling you what's been going on for them, asking open questions can invite a more detailed response. And what we mean by this are questions such as, tell me how you're feeling, how do you look after yourself, and what support do you have in place? This can give more detailed responses in comparison to something like a closed question where we may say to somebody, so have you been feeling sad? And they might say yes or no. So using open questions gives them an opportunity to expand more upon their experience. And then also check your understanding by paraphrasing and reflecting back. This can be done using reflections just to make sure that you've really understood what the person is saying to you. Another tip that you can try is using empathetic statements. These are things like saying, "I appreciate this must be difficult for you." And what we recommend is that we try to avoid cliches and comments like, "Oh, we'll all look better tomorrow after a good night's sleep," or "You're just having a bad day." And whilst somebody might feel better after having a good night's sleep, it makes an assumption that it will all look better, and it minimizes the impact that someone's struggles may be having on their well-being. We can also then, as part of the conversation, signpost to further information and support, and it can be helpful to ask the person what they feel would help them. If you're having this conversation with somebody as a supervisor or a manager, it can be helpful to put these into actions, considering things like workplace adjustments, for example, and also then arranging to have a follow-up conversation with the person to check in and see how they're doing. As mentioned by the guide, these wellbeing conversations should not be a one-off discussion. They should promote further conversation and support as needed for the individual. And the last point there is also really important to bear in mind. And it's around remembering to look after your own mental health. You should be clear about what you can do as well as what you can't. And having information and support you can signpost someone to can be a big part of that. Finally, a couple of conversation do's and don'ts. So do listen without judgment and don't try to fix it. Do validate their feelings and let them know that you care. And do show understanding and empathy. And some don'ts. Try not to interrupt the person. Try not to fix their problem with lots of solutions. Though there may be some practical solutions that you could signpost someone to, check with them if this is what they want, because often people may just be looking for a space to talk and to feel validated rather than lots of solutions. Don't diagnose them with a mental health problem, and don't be scared to discuss or hear about difficult feelings. And most importantly, don't tell them how they should feel. It may feel comfortable for us to say, "Oh, I went through this," or "I experienced this and this worked for me," but everybody's experiences are different. The most important thing that you can do in that wellbeing conversation is listen to the person without judgment and validate them, just so that they know you care and you are understanding of what they're going through. If you're looking for something to help you structure questions and discussions in wellbeing conversations, Mind's Wellness Action Plans are an easy, practical way of helping to support your own mental health at work, and if you're a manager, helping you to support the mental health of your team. However, if you feel more formal action is necessary, you may want to consider completing the Cardiff and Vale University Health Board Work-Related Stress Risk Assessment. If you're a manager and you're not sure what this is, I'd advise that you either watch the recording of the Stress Risk Assessment guidance facilitated by the Employee Wellbeing Service on this YouTube channel, or attend the workshop live, where you'll have an opportunity to learn more about the work-related stress risk assessment and learn how to complete them to support the mental health of your team. If you're an individual, you can also request to have these work-related stress risk assessments completed, and there is an associated aid that can help you with preparing for the conversation and to help you to know what sort of things might need to be considered to best support you and your mental health at work. We now have a case study for you to get you to think about, in groups or as an individual, how you may go about having wellbeing conversations based on what we've learned so far today. In this case study, members of your team have reported experiencing work-related stress. Following a restructure in the department, a change in job duties has led to high levels of anxiety, with some of the team feeling that they are struggling to keep up with the workload and maintain positive working relationships with colleagues, and they shared their feeling physically and emotionally exhausted. Now we want you to imagine that you're having wellbeing conversations with your team after hearing this case study, And start developing a wellbeing action plan or thinking about how you might support your team. Consider having one-to-one and group conversations and think about what are the priorities, what is an appropriate review period, how will you know if things have improved or worsened, and also consider does the team or individual need any further support or signposting. If you're watching this as a group, pause the video and rewind to the case study and then pause it so you can keep it on your screen, and then have an opportunity to talk about these questions and think about how you might support the team and individuals within it. Do the same if you're watching this by yourself, and then when you're ready, come back to this slide on having a go and press play to see some of the ideas that we have that might be helpful to consider. Hopefully this gave you an opportunity to discuss the case study in your groups or as individuals, and here are a couple of the suggestions that we have that may have been helpful to consider. So consider doing a stress risk assessment for the team or individuals within the team to see what sort of things may be affecting their work-related stress, and to consider the sort of adjustments that may be appropriate to put in place, and also to arrange follow-up meetings so that you can check in and see how the team and individuals are doing. It can also be useful to think about whether you might need to upskill the team or individuals with further training, because as we mentioned earlier, when there is that balance between the demands and pressures in our lives and our capabilities to cope, we can find that it is much better on looking after our mental health. In terms of the frequency and the appropriate review periods, we've suggested having regular one-to-ones and regular team meetings just whilst you're going through this process of supporting your team or the individuals, and considering whether to use a graded approach of reduction that is tailored to the needs of the team or individuals. You can also suggest something like a CAVUHB coffee, which where you'd get together with your teams to give them the opportunity to talk with each other about their mental health. And it doesn't necessarily need to be involving coffee, it can be involving water, tea, juice, anything that can get people together to have an opportunity to chat whilst they're having a nice drink. You may also want to think about something like a buddy system. So whilst somebody is maybe developing their skills, they could have support from somebody who's gone through a similar process or may be able to give them advice and support too. You can also consider something like an end of shift check-in and check-out, where you think to yourselves at the end of the day, what went well today and what am I going to do to support my well-being going forward? And in terms of referring to further support, we'll talk about this in more detail in the later slides on signposting. Here is another video from NHS England, which is a follow-up to the video we saw earlier about wellbeing conversations, and it's a 3-minute staff experience video on why wellbeing conversations are important. Again, unfortunately, we're unable to record this as part of recording this presentation, so I will link this in the description so you can have an opportunity to watch it and then return to this video. One method of signposting is the 5 ways to wellbeing. The New Economics Foundation conducted research on ways to support our mental well-being, and their findings were that there are 5 different ways that we can look to support our well-being. The first being connection, and the idea behind this is that connection is one of the pillar stones of our emotional and social well-being, so it encourages you to reach out to others, make those connections, whether it's through phone calls, messages, meeting up in person. The idea behind it is to talk to each other, listen to what others have to say, and to really be there and feel connected to those around us. The second way is to be active, and the logo there is the do what you can and enjoy what you do. Moving will help your mood. So we're not suggesting that you go out there and run a 5K immediately if this is something that you've not done before. But what we are saying is finding something that feels good for you so that you can get your body moving in a way that fits with your mobility levels and fitness. And then the third point there is to take notice. And as it says, remembering the simple things that give you joy. Often when we're going through a difficult period with our mental health, we can find ourselves maybe being more focused on our thoughts and our feelings rather than noticing the things that are going on around us in our lives that do bring us that joy. So what this says is to try to employ some of those mindfulness practices of being in the present moment, maybe noticing things like the changes of the seasons, the weather, if you're walking to and from your car, noticing things like the sounds around you and things like that. Just trying to bring our attention back to the present moment. And number 4 is around keeping learning. So as it says there, embracing new experiences, seeing opportunities, and finding ways to surprise yourself. And I know that a lot of us do learning as part of our jobs, but this may be things that are learning specifically for you. So trying a new recipe or learning a new hobby or a skill, just finding a way to enjoy new experiences, to give ourselves that sense of achievement that we might get when we learn something new. And lastly, it is around give. So it says here, your time, your words, your presence. And for a lot of us who work within a healthcare settings, we are giving this a lot of the time anyway. So what we tend to say to people is, if you're able to give your time, words and presence, that's absolutely fine. But if you're not able to do that because you're already giving a lot within your work life, maybe give your time, your kind words and your presence to yourself. Give yourself that permission to have that self-care, to take that time for yourself, because this is also an important way to support your well-being. Now I'll talk you through some of the services that are available to support you at Cardiff and Vale University Health Board. Firstly, for those of you who aren't aware, you can access the Employee Wellbeing Service for support for your mental health and well-being. It's a self-referral only service and you can contact us via telephone or email to self-refer, and you've got our contact details on the slide there. If you were able to, you can access the self-referral form on our website, which is available on the Cardiff and Vale University Health Board staff information pages. And then once you've completed the referral form, send that in to us and we'll process your referral and get you booked in for a resource appointment. This is an opportunity to come and talk to a professional about any issue or situation which is either home or work related, and that appointment can last for up to an hour. All of these initial appointments are offered via telephone or video appointment using Attend Anywhere. And once you've had that opportunity to talk with the professional about the situation, they will hopefully be able to offer you some resources and some plan for support going forward. Some of the services that the Wellbeing team offers are counselling. So they offer up to 6 sessions of brief focused counselling, which can provide you with a safe, non-judgmental space to explore the things which are causing you difficulty in your life. They can also signpost you to appropriate options for guided self-help, which is a brief low-intensity therapy based on the principles of cognitive behavioural therapy, and these aim to help people with mild to moderate mental health problems. There's also options for workshops, so the Employee Wellbeing Service runs sessions for managers and ongoing workshops on topics such as compassion and self-care, introduction to assertiveness, menopause awareness, and stress risk assessment for managers. If you haven't heard about it already, the Wellbeing Services also provide training and ongoing support for staff who want to train as a wellbeing champion for their area so that they can offer wellbeing support and signposting to their teams. The Wellbeing Service can also signpost you to a range of resources such as our newsletters, resource packs, our YouTube channel, and other helpful resources and signposting, all of which can also be accessed on our EWS webpage. And then lastly, there's the Menopause Cafe, which is a space for you to come together with colleagues to explore how the menopause may be affecting you or someone you know. And these sessions are open to anybody, regardless of their age, gender, or experience of the menopause. It's an opportunity for people to come together to have that peer support. All of our workshops are available via our Eventbrite page, so you should be able to search up the Wellbeing Services on there and see what we've got coming up that you can book onto. Another great resource is Maximus. This was formerly known as Remploy, and they're funded by the Department for Work and Pensions, and they're a self-referral service for access to mental health support. So once you've self-referred into them, they will assign you somebody to support you with providing you with strategies, and they have a graded reduction approach of support, and they can offer support for up to 9 months. There's a video here, which again, as I've said before, I'm unable to record the playing of, but I will link this in the description, and I'll also link their web pages so that you can have a look at it. But it's a fantastic resource and is really good for people if they want to get some support and some strategies for a longer period of time. If you were looking for information on support for long COVID and long COVID recovery, there's the Keeping Me Well website, which supports people with COVID and long COVID recovery, and it has advice to support physical and mental recovery, as well as videos that demonstrate exercises and techniques that people can follow to support their recovery. And there's also the COVID Recovery app. In addition to this, there is the BAME Helpline Wales, which is open now, and the helpline advisors can signpost to relevant organisations and services in someone's area. They can also provide specialist employment advice and signpost and refer to other specialist organisations. And what's really great about this service is they provide information in a range of community languages, so you can access that whether English is not your first language, or if you needed to signpost it to somebody who maybe would prefer to speak in another language. And they can provide information in relation to health, work, personal safety, your rights, education, housing, and welfare entitlements. Further therapy and support strategies can be found at these 3 websites. There is Silver Cloud, which is an online cognitive behavioural therapy that is accessible for anybody with a GP in Wales and has also been really helpful for NHS staff. It's a form of guided self-help, and they've got lots of different packages on there, from anxiety to stress to depression and to things like panic. There's also Canopy, which is a self-referral service, and they're able to provide wellbeing support, guided self-help, and virtual one-to-one counselling following that self-referral, and it's available to all health and social care staff in Wales. And then lastly, you've got the Centre for Clinical Interventions, which offers free self-help guides and strategies for common mental health difficulties. And if you were looking for specific helplines for further support and information, we've provided you with the 5 on the screen here. So you've got Samaritans, who also have their confidential NHS staff support line in addition to their regular public helpline. And you've got Cruise Bereavement Helpline, the Community Advice and Listening Line, Shout, which is a 24/7 text service for anyone in crisis on all major mobile networks in the UK that's accessible for free. And then you've got Mind Cymru, which provides information on their info line, and then you've got the details for that there too. Finally, it's just to say diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you had any further questions about the presentation or wanted to find out more about the Employee Wellbeing Service, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. But once again, thank you for watching.